Hello, I'm Cheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. For years, she was a star attraction in Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Marilyn Monroe copied one of her catchphrases, and Boop, a new musical about her life, seems headed for Broadway. I'm talking about Betty Boop, the cartoon character who emerged in the 1930s and became an American icon. What's the reason for her enduring appeal? And how did a cartoon character become a model for women today? Peter Benjaminson traces the evolution of this beguiling figure in his new book, The Life and Times of Betty Boop, the 100-year history of an animated icon. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Peter, I know you for your books about music, Motown, that kind of thing, popular singers. Why Betty Boop?
Well, because Betty Boop is very popular and has been popular for a long time, much more popular than the Motown singers, who to a certain extent come and go. As you indicated, Betty represents a lot of different things to a lot of different women. That's her real secret of the real secret of her success. She's independent, she's free, but she doesn't seem to have children. She never got married. But she seems to have a lot of sex. In a way, that's a perfect model, apparently, for hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of women all over the world. Betty's been that popular with that many women since 1930. It's really incredible how long she's managed to pull off this act, and that's what my book is about.
I think everybody would recognize her, but why don't you describe what she looks like?
Well, she's a somewhat shapely, young-looking woman, and she's pretty, good-looking, shapely woman. That's basically it. She's very energetic and is very interested in looking good for men and looking for men that are suitable for her, but never really settling down with anyone. She's more interested in her career, but nevertheless seems to have a lot of a social and probably a sexual life.
Tell us about how she came to be created.
Well, the Fleischer Studios, which were in Manhattan at the time, right near here on 42nd Street, created a dog cartoon character named Bimbo. Then they decided that Bimbo needed a girlfriend. So that's when they created Betty, and they created her as a dog. She had a doggy head and a fairly doggy body, but she had some human attributes, which was just like Bimbo, who is a completely dog-looking dog.
But he's humanized.
Yes, he walks on two legs, he plays the guitar. He does and did work as a waiter in various restaurants. So they had to get a girlfriend for him, and that's when Betty was created. For a long while, though, she had doggy features. She had doggy, flappy ears and various other doggy characteristics, which qualified her, I guess, to be Bimbo's girlfriend or dog friend.
But over time, they more and more humanized her.
As she got more popular, and they realized that she couldn't stay a dog forever, they made her flapping doggy ears into earrings, and basically made her a complete human woman.
Now the cartoon started in the 1930s, but she's basically modeled after the 1920s flappers, right?
Yes, that's right. After World War I, with hundreds of thousands of people dead, probably most of them men because of the war, and then everybody being hit by the Spanish flu, women, that is real women, started to take marriage much less seriously because there were very many fewer available men. I mean, something like 70 million people had died worldwide. That was mostly in Europe and America. So the flappers then were young women who decided to be more independent and to look like they were more independent. One of the things they did for some reason was during the winter when you had to wear boots, they kept their boots open. And so as they walked down the street, the boots would flap. That's where they got the name flappers. But they were also known not only for that, that was just a handle, for being not as conservative as their mothers. You know, they'd go to bars, they flirted with men,
They
smoked,
drank.
they drank. They were the hot kids of the 20s. And that's who Betty was built on. That's who her image was built on. The Fleischer brothers, who ran a cartoon studio right here in New York City, a couple of blocks from here, wanted a larger audience, and they knew women were a big audience, and they wanted to make a woman character who would appeal to the women of the age, i.e. the flappers and the other women who admired them.
During the Depression, they probably wanted somebody who was kind of upbeat, I would think.
Absolutely, yes. 1930 was a bad year for this country. I mean, seriously, homeless problem was overwhelming, even more so than it is now. Many, many people were out of work. There was no unemployment insurance. There was no welfare. There was no nothing. People, lots of men who had formerly worked in steel mills and so on, were tramping around. It was called the Depression, partly because it was economic, but also because it was spiritual and moody. Everyone was really sad about what was happening and wanted to be cheered up. And Betty was one of the things that the Fleischer brothers used to cheer them up. She was so popular, by the way, that her cartoons were shown in movie theaters, but they were shown before the major film attraction that everyone had paid to see. And often the applause was so loud for the first showing of a Betty Boop cartoon that the theater owner would tell a projectionist to run it again, and then the applause would still be loud.
Okay.
So you'd have 4 Betty Boop cartoons run twice before the actual show that had been on the marquee was projected. Then they started putting Betty Boop cartoons on the marquee, even though that wasn't the main feature of the movie theater.
Okay. Now, was she based on some real persons?
Yes. It's a complicated situation, which was actually brought to court in New York County Supreme Court. There was an actress, a white actress named Helen Kane, who was a big star. The Fleischers and their animators knew that Helen was a big star, so they modeled Betty on Helen Kane. She had spit curls. She looked like Betty, obviously.
Right.
Spit curls, circular eyes. She was very cute. She flipped around a lot. After Betty got really popular, Helen Kane, who was a very, very popular actress on Broadway, sued the Fleischers. She said, "You stole my stuff, man. What are you doing?" She sued him for a tremendous amount of money at the time. There was a long trial. Sometime they were discussing what phrase Betty used. And some people would say boop boop, some would say boop boop. And the lawyers would argue this back and forth. The stenographer in the court finally had a fit. He said, "I can't keep up with this. You've got to tell me, what are you talking about? How do you spell this stuff?" Anyway, after this long trial, the judge ruled that Helen was not going to get a payment or payoff, I should say a legal payment, because Helen herself had copied her look and her catchphrases from 2 black female entertainers who were never credited.
But it was boop boop a doop, boop boop a doop,
Right.
that Betty's catchphrase.
Come on, honey, do something. Boop, boop, a doop. Not the time and the place and the time I know. I got a bench and a park and a park and a bench and boop, boop, a doop.
I think I read in your book that she was supposed to be like about 16 years old, the character of Betty Boop. She was also a sex kitten
Yes.
in a lot of ways, sort of like in the tradition of Mae West and Jean Harlow. So on the one hand, she was innocent, and the other hand, she was not.
Miss Beauty at last.
Stop!
Do you like your job?
Uh-huh.
Well, I think if I were you, I'd go somewhere. You better come out with me tonight. Have some dinner.
You mean?
No! There'll be no more boop-boop-a-doop out of you!
You can feed me bread and water, or a great big bale of hay. Oh, but don't take my boop-boop-a-doop away.
Well, you know, in the 30s, this is before there was any censorship of movies, which started being enforced around 1934. But from 1930 to 34, you know, with all these people having nothing to do except sit in a movie theater day after day for whatever it was, 10 cents, they started making very sexy films. There was one film in which it had major actors in it. A man was having an affair with this woman, but he was married. He decided he was going to stop having an affair with her. She objected to him.
Give me that key. Give me that key.
Oh, you're afraid. You're afraid of yourself because you know you love me.
Oh, am I?
Now you're afraid you're going to take me in your arms.
And she said, no, I'm not letting you out. So he slapped her across the face really hard, leaving big marks on her face. She said, ooh, I like it. Do it again.
You don't dare stay here. You don't trust yourself. Oh, do it again. I like it. Do it again.
That was the kind of movie that was drawing in people. So Betty could hardly do anything like that. She was trying to catch up with that kind of stuff.
And you write that the animators at the, is it pronounced Fleischer?
Yes.
Studios, a lot of them were like young guys who spent time, you know, drinking and playing cards and chasing prostitutes. And so
They were living the high life all in one building right near the Fleischer Studios. I think it was on 44th Street.
Mr. Fleischer, can you let me see how Betty Boop does her stuff?
Yes, I'll have her ready for you in just a moment.
Okay.
And I'll have her go through some of the stuff for you.
Fine, thanks.
Oh, Betty, this gentleman from the press, you know.
Every weekend they'd have card parties, you know, communal card parties, drinking parties, and sex parties. And since this was their life on the weekends, and the other 5 days of the week, it circulated into Betty.
right. Now, the recurring themes in her cartoons were, one, being as sexy as possible and trying to find a male love interest.
Yes, that's true, but she never actually connected with a male love interest. I mean, she apparently, no sex was ever shown on screen.
It was, though it was hinted at.
Well, it was heavily implied. They also had Popeye as a cartoon, and in cartoon character. They invented him also. And at one point, it wasn't Popeye, but it was another sailor. This is in one of Betty's cartoons. A sailor came over to her house, went up the stairs when the neighbors were watching. He went in. You could see him go into the living room, and Betty's dress flew up, you know, revealing her underpants. This was quite a show for a cartoon. You know, she was obviously going to have sex. Then he immediately closed the blinds, and while the neighbors watched, there was all this noise going on. So she was having sex. It's just that she never got married.
Okay. And the dress flying up scene, you know, we see that later in the Marilyn Monroe, the famous scene.
Yes.
Where she's standing over the subway grate and her,
Yes.
her skirt flies up.
Right.
You make the point in your book that all cartoons are surreal in some way, but that the Betty Boop cartoons were more surreal than most.
Yes, that's true. The surrealistic movies started around the 30s because the theater owners wanted to keep all these people in the theater. They kept coming up, but they knew they were sitting there day after day, night after night. So they tried to come up with new things.
Guess they didn't have jobs, so they might as well go to
They just sat there.
Right.
So they came up with surrealism, which was based on Salvador Dali, the painter, but involved some excellent non-Betty Boop movies in which buildings weren't really there. They were just painted outlines of building, and the characters pretended they were in buildings. So there's one famous scene where a woman is looking out at the camera and someone cuts her eyeball from top to bottom with a razor blade for no particular reason. These were mesmerizing scenes, and that's the kind of thing that Betty was after, trying to keep people looking at the screen.
A lot of the cartoons, I don't know how many there were altogether. Do you know
About 100.
About 100. A lot of the cartoons are built around songs, songs
Yes.
that she's singing or songs that somebody else is playing. And well, tell me about the use of music in the cartoons.
Well, she sang a lot of songs. She sang popular songs.
You got to hold the ho.
You gotta hold the ho.
You got to hide the
You
high.
gotta hide the high.
You got to heat the heat to get along with me.
Yeah, man, how do?
You got to learn my song.
I got to learn your song.
If you do me wrong,
I'm gonna do you wrong.
you got to kick the gong to get along with me.
One of the interesting things she did with that was, let me just preface it by saying that the Harlem was not far, as it is today, is not far from Times Square. And in the 30s, for the same reason, it had a huge entertainment community. You know, basically black musicians and black choreens would entertain thousands of people every weekend. And the young Fleischer unmarried animators would always go up there.
Hold the ho, the ho. Hold the ho, the ho. Hey, the hey, the hey. Hey, the hey.
Betty and the Fleischers decided to incorporate the black musicians into Betty's cartoons. It's several cartoons, they're really great, and they're all available on YouTube for free.
Now, they did use some racial stereotypes. They did show up in some of the cartoons, correct?
Yes, yeah.
I'll be glad when you're dead, you
Yes,
rascal
that's
you.
right.
Right.
It was his song, I'll Be Glad When You're Dead, You Rascal You. The song was aimed at a man who was trying to seduce the singer's wife.
I'll be glad when you're dead, you rascal you. Oh, you rascal you. Boy, I brought you into my home. You wouldn't leave my wife alone. I'll be glad when you're dead, you rascal you.
His lips were swollen out and he had African hair, which is really quite an insult to him. But he went along with it apparently because cartoon increased the revenue for his band. The Fleischers arranged so that they'd start the cartoons in a city in which, say, Louis Armstrong's band was starting to play down the street. So the publicity from the cartoon would vastly increase the audience for Louis Armstrong's band, live band performance.
How did censorship, when it came in, change Betty Boop cartoon?
Yes, it was the Hays Code, which you're referring to. It was passed early in the 30s, but they didn't get organized until 34. And then Betty became a housewife. Her dresses were longer. She gained a little weight. As somebody once put it, she started being a homebody, which means she started caring more for her home than her body.
I've got those house cleaning blues. There's floors to scrub and windows to rub. I've got those house cleaning blues.
Bimbo, who'd been a kind of a randy dog male figure, became a little puppy
Really?
in her house. And she had a suburban house. She did the dishes.
Oh my goodness.
She still managed to get innuendo in there, but it was nothing as blatant as they'd done before the code was passed.
And I gather that sort of this making her less sexy, the popularity of the cartoon began to diminish for a while.
Yes, that's true. Except the cartoons, they were still pretty good. They had one cartoon where Betty, wearing, at home, doing the dishes, gets a call from Grampy that he's going to have a party, and so can she come over there? She immediately goes out into the street and starts strutting along in her fairly tight dress, going,
We're at Grampy's house, so I'm on my way to Grampy's. For he always treats me nice. Always something on the ice.
Where?
Over at Grampy's house. Da-da-dee-da-da-da-dee. It never is too late. Da-da-dee-da-da-da-dee. It never is too late.
when they get to Grampy's house, all they do is dance and drink. They don't do anything, sexual. So she was still using her stuff, but not to get as far as she did previously.
Okay. So the popularity diminished for a while, but then she started to make a comeback, what, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s?
Yes. Finally, in 1939, her first wave of popularity ended. And the Fleischers, in fact, went out of business. They were replaced by famous studios, which produced Casper, the friendly ghost, which I thought was a perfect send-off for Betty, that a ghost was now the big star. But yes, then in the 1960s, all the cartoons had been saved, and the Fleischers had lost the copyright on them. So a lot of college campuses and big cities had head festivals because there were drugs in Betty Boop's cartoons too. At one point, she was working in a dentist's office, and Coco, the clown, one of her friends, came over and said he had a bad toothache. So, but he can't afford the dentist. So she was a dental assistant. She tried to take the ailing tooth out with the pliers, but she couldn't do it very well. So he was in great pain. So she gave him laughing gas. And then she and the patient started laughing hilariously. Then the laughing gas escaped onto a New York City street. And you could see a film of people on a New York City street going, ah, 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 that was the kind of thing she was good at.
Okay. Now, it was not just the cartoon. There were also comic strips and comic books. And she appeared at some point on TV specials and in a movie. I remember her very well from the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yes.
Cigars, cigarettes, Eddie Valiant.
Betty?
Long time no see.
What are you doing here?
Work's been kind of slow since cartoons went to color. But I still got it, Eddie. Boop, boop-be-doo.
Yeah, you still got it.
She made a comeback in the 60s because the censorship was dropped. The Hays Code went out of business. It was replaced by a rating system. So that meant Betty was free to do whatever she wanted. And she's still a major character. All her cartoons are available for free on YouTube. You can watch them the rest of your life if you want. And hundreds of thousands of people watch them all the time. The cartoons have been reproduced in Japan, and she's still extremely popular.
And she's been on postage stamps in some of the African countries. And
well, I hope I haven't mentioned this before, but there are 130,000 Betty Boop products now available on eBay. These people aren't putting them up there not to sell them. They're putting them up there because there's a market for them.
Okay.
She's extremely popular.
What do you think is behind her enduring appeal, and certainly her appeal to women as well?
Oh, it's her independence, really. She does what a lot of women would like to do. She's had, in her cartoons, she's had numerous jobs. She's been in the movies, she worked in a circus, she ran a pet store, she was a housewife. She's done everything that most women would like to do, one or the other, and she maintains her independence.
If I were judge for a day, I would make those pesky pesters pay and pay. I sentence soul-back slackers who get sunburnt on the back, and then have all their friends come up and give them a whack. Horn blowers I punish this way.
She never got married. She pursues a lot of men, too. There's one hilarious sequence in her comic strips where the Fleischers had her pursue a gay man. They didn't say he was gay, but he obviously was in the cartoon. At one point, she tries the old handkerchief trick where she drops her handkerchief, and he, knowing what she's doing, he doesn't want to tell her he's gay, but so he picks up her handkerchief and then blows his own nose in it, which is somewhat offensive and should have got the message across, but it didn't, because she liked him and she was determined to get him, but that didn't stop her. So it's independence, really,
right,
and freedom.
And now Betty Boop, or I think it's called Boop, the musical is coming out.
Yes, it is. It's a coincidence that my book is going to be released on November 15th, and the musical is going to open in Chicago on November 19th. I think it shows the tremendous interest that is still existing in Betty. She's still a very attractive figure, I think for the reasons I just mentioned. Women, she preceded the women's movement, really. Women want to be more independent. They want to be recognized for everything they do, whether or not they get married or have children or domesticated, so to speak.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank Peter Benjaminson, author of The Life and Times of Betty Boop, the 100-year history of an animated icon, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on Twitter at 121 CUNY TV. For the City University of New York and 121, I'm Cheryl McCarthy.